You intend to, and if we need, when we get past 5:15 or so, come to a logical conclusion, unless you think we can wrap up by 5:30.
I don't know.
I'm not anticipating that it's gonna happen. Just
You never know. You never know. We're all pretty tired. All right. Detective Hayes. I don't think I need to introduce myself. We've been sitting here together now for 2.5 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the beginning of your involvement in this case.
Okay.
And so that was roughly 1:30 on the 5th, correct?
Roughly, yes.
Roughly. And what were you doing earlier in the day?
Just a normal day at the office. We just finished lunch. We usually went to lunch around 11:30.
What did the call sound like? I mean, you gave a little bit of a rendition, but what did you think you were coming up on?
Coming up to an accident that someone had a medical episode and fallen into a brush fire.
And did you and Kuykendall typically work together back then?
Yes.
So, like every case, would you have called yourselves partners? Because I think you said you guys were not partners.
We would help each other. So we were the two people in the day shift, what we called the persons unit. It was just me and him. That was it. So if we needed help and the other wasn't busy, our desks were next to. I think I sat in front of him. He was right behind me. So.
Okay. But you weren't his boss.
Correct.
Okay. But you were, in this case, Hans looked at you and said, "You're going to do this one."
Correct.
You're the lead.
Correct.
How quickly was that from the time you responded? Was Hans already there?
Yeah, it happened on scene. Kuykendall and I had shown up. We called back to the office and said, this is not, this is more than what we thought it was. It appears to be more than what we thought it was. And that's when more people started coming.
So you and Hans were there, or you were there before basically all of Cherokee County got there. Y'all were some of the first responding from Cherokee, SO.
Uniform patrols on scene of the Free Home Precinct. They're the local responders. We were coming all the way from Woodstock. That's where our office is, the Criminal Investigation Office. So we were the first members of Criminal Investigations that arrived on scene.
Okay. Why did he pick you to be the lead?
I don't know.
What was the normal way of assigning cases back then?
If it was a case that Uniform Patrol had taken a report on and CID response wasn't required, Sergeant Hans, Detective Kuykendall, or myself, we would come in every morning and we would review cases, decide which cases to screen, and that means those don't have enough solvability factors. We're not going to work it. So we screen those. We kind of get those off the list, and then you go through the list and decide what can be worked, what needs to be prioritized, and things along those lines. If it's an active scene, we respond and a supervisor makes a decision on the scene.
So you guys get there, you're assigned, but you'd already been down to the burn pile.
Yes.
Right. And what did you tell, you're the one that called in and said, look, we think this is more than simply an accident.
I don't remember if I called him or Kuykendall. I believe Kuykendall probably called back to the South Annex.
He's the one that said this is more than an accident, Kuykendall.
Oh, we both looked at it and we're like, well, this is not what we expected to see when we got here. So we need more eyes on scene. We need to let our supervisors know.
Right. What training at that point, which I know now, obviously since this case, you've probably learned a lot about this kind of stuff. But at that point, what training did you have in bodies being destroyed by fire?
Early in my criminal investigations career, I did help with it was a murder-suicide where the defendant, or the suspect, there was no defendant, burned the house down on top of the family. So I had responded to that scene. I had seen bodies that had been burned up in a fire. As far as formal training, actually being taught in a class, I don't think I had any at the time. Correct.
Just in the field, you had that one case, and then this case came along.
Correct.
And now you have more formal training than probably you ever could have imagined.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so you then, tell me about you kind of parsing apart the people that you saw. Who did you see first? The first person that you spoke to that day in the family?
I walked up and, most of the family that was there was hanging out in the driveway area. I saw them, didn't know who they were at first, walked past them, to go talk to my law enforcement partners that were on the scene to figure out
Pinion was there.
kind of size. He wasn't there yet.
Okay.
So at the time, Pinion was my captain, so he was the highest ranking, he was the CID commander. So he would have been doing whatever he was doing. He may have been at the office, I don't recall. But you follow the chain of command. We would call back, our direct supervisor was Sergeant Hands. We told him what we had, then he would make his notifications above him.
And above him was Pinion?
Ultimately above him was Pinion, but between him and Pinion would have been Lieutenant Clark.
Lieutenant who?
Clark, Daryl Clark.
All right, was he on scene?
At some point, yes, he came out there.
Okay, now, he did come out.
He did.
All right. And did Pinion talk to Scott before Kuykendall did?
I don't know.
From the reports. I mean, because you're the head guy on this case, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've been sitting here for the whole time, and we're going to talk a lot about every aspect of this. And I'm going to do everything I can. I don't think I'm going to get this finished by 5:30 today, but I'm going to try. But you ultimately, the buck stops with you, correct?
Not necessarily. I was named the lead detective, which in my eyes meant, when I hate to call it fun, but when the crime scene, when everything's over and all the work on the back end happens, the search warrants and all that, I'm the guy that gets to sit on the stand and talk about it all at the end, basically. So on the scene, there was multiple lieutenants, multiple sergeants, a captain, all them. They outrank me. So even though I'm lead detective, if I say I think we need to do this and they say otherwise, I have to do what they tell me.
And that's kind of what's come across, I think, to the jury is really nobody can put their finger on who's really in charge of this investigation. Would you say that's fair?
I can see how it would come across that way, yes.
Okay. All right, so how did it get decided that you would go spend, which obviously you didn't know how long you were going to talk to Melody, because it was within 30 minutes of you arriving that you sat down on the porch and talked to her. Mm-hmm. How did you and Kuykendall say, well, I'll talk to Melody, you talk to Scott?
I don't recall exactly how the decision was made. It would have been between Detective Kuykendall and I, or Sergeant Hands, of, you go talk to this person, you go talk to this person. Obviously, Melody and Scott were the people who lived on the property, so I believe that's why they were chosen to speak with them first.
Okay. So, when was the first time, which the jury has heard your whole recording, which, I mean, there's, hours, obviously, of these recordings with Melody. But when did you and Kuykendall reconvene after he took Scott and set Scott in the car and you got done with Melody? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly when. It would have been sometime after that.
Okay, what do you remember Kuykendall said to you?
I remember hearing about, more information about the gun that Scott was saying was missing.
So you say more information. Prior to that, had any of the on-scene witnesses said, this guy Scott Farris says there's a gun missing?
I think Scott was telling the initial arriving officers as they were getting there.
So you'd already heard that?
Yes.
Before you sat down and talked to Melody?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And I don't think you brought any of that up with her in the first interview, right?
I don't recall if I did. I don't think I did.
All right. So let's go back to Kuykendall. So Kuykendall, he kind of goes in, gets him in the car, talks to him. Jury's heard that, or at least his rendition of that and Scott's rendition of that. But what did he tell you, Kuykendall?
Just a brief overview of what, I don't remember his exact words of what Scott had told him. He would have told me what he felt was important from his conversation that I should know, is the best way I can put it. So definitely, I recall learning more about this missing gun, like what piece of furniture, the story about it being a couple weeks prior when he was down there about with the cable guy, looking for the remote.
I'm going to ask you this. I mean, did it not seem a little weird? I mean, you showed up. There's a body that's burned to the point of not being recognizable. Don't really necessarily know who it is at that point, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you've got Scott Farris over here talking about a bullet or a gun.
Correct.
Okay. Did you not think that was kind of odd?
It caught me by surprise. Yeah, I mean, it caught my attention.
Like no evidence in the house has been found yet of, which by the way, when did you guys get the search warrant?
I don't believe I was on scene. I did not author the first couple of search warrants. It was later that evening. I believe it was after the first bullet was found.
The
in
search
the rib
warrants.
cage.
What's that now?
I believe it was after the first bullet was found in the rib cage. Would have been the search warrant to get inside the house.
Okay. So you guys weren't searching the house before the bullet was found?
Not inside the house that I recall.
Because wasn't the bullet found, like, I mean, we're talking about towards midnight, and Detective Kuykendall had already been in the house, and he'd been on the floor, and he'd found the bullet while you were talking to Melody at one point at the precinct.
So we're talking about two different bullets. The bullet I was referring to was the one found in the rib bone that was out in the fire pit. That was found in the evening, because I know I interviewed Melody the second time at about 9:30 at the Freeholm precinct, and I had discovered that prior to that interview. The bullet in the basement floor was found after that.
So that's your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. So, but you were made aware of the bullet in the rib cage while you were talking to Melody at the 9:30, or what time?
No, it was before that.
Okay.
That was the reason for the second interview. We had new information that we needed to,
Right. Just trying to get our bullets right. Which one you knew about first?
The rib cage.
Rib cage bullet. All right.
Yes.
But let's go back to, when did you leave the scene at Purcell Lane?
As in to go to Freeholm to interview Melody?
Yeah.
It would have been a little before meeting her there.
Okay. So
We were on the scene when we discussed going there to be interviewed because she was still hanging out in the driveway.
okay. Was the sun still up?
Was the sun still up?
Yeah, that's just a good way to tell. I mean, it's summertime.
Yeah, I don't recall if the sun was still up or not. It was around that dusk, getting around that dusk time, based off of the time of my interview with her.
All right. So y'all agreed to go over, and you've explained all that to the jury, but where was Kuykendall at that time?
I don't know. He was on the scene somewhere doing whatever he had been assigned to do.
All right. Going in the house.
I'm assuming.
That's when he found the bullet.
At some point, yes.
Okay. You've been sitting here. This is very unique that well, it is and it isn't, but you're the only witness that has sat here throughout this entire investigation, because there's an exception that allows you to do that.
Yes.
As you've seen more and more and more of the on-scene investigation, you would agree with me that that did not go according to plan.
I don't know what the initial plan was, so I don't know if it went according to plan or not.
Well, you're not a crime scene expert.
That's correct.
That's not what you do.
That's correct.
But you knew that these guys, I mean, as we've all been sitting here learning throughout this case, that you've got crime scene supplements, detectives supplement crime scene, and they all kind of have to work together towards one goal, right?
Correct.
But you would agree with me that almost immediately this crime scene kind of devolved into chaos.
I wouldn't call it chaos. It's definitely expansive. It was more than we typically handle.
Sure. And you had, I believe, Detective Kuykendall. Were you there when he was dispatched to go stand at the tractor?
I would have been on scene. I don't recall hearing it or seeing it done.
Right. Is it not unusual for a detective who's supposed to be talking to witnesses that all of a sudden this detective, he's going to go over here and stand watch next to a tractor?
Unusual?
I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, at the time, I don't know exactly how many people were on scene or who directed him to do it, but I wouldn't say it would be unusual. I've stood and held crime scenes if I wasn't the lead detective multiple times.
Okay. But he's already interviewed Scott, and then you guys, in that afternoon, were interviewing Chris, Emily shows up, Amanda, Melody, all these people, and somebody thought it was a good idea for Detective Kuykendall to go stand next to a tractor?
I'm assuming so. Yes.
Okay. Who was that?
I don't know. It wasn't me.
I mean, at one point, and I have to think, again, we've all been on this case for years, but sometimes I think, what was Hayes thinking at this moment? If I look over and if Michael Ray is over here trying to guard a tractor and we're in the middle of a very serious trial, I would be kind of angry about that. Were you? When you realized your partner's essentially standing next to a tractor?
No. I had multiple detectives and investigators on scene that day that were doing different things, so I don't even think like I told you, I don't even think I noticed him missing. I assumed he was out doing whatever he was told.
Okay. By somebody else, and we don't know who that was.
Correct.
All right.
I don't know who it is.
What's that?
I don't know who it was.
Right.
Who told
and
me.
that's fine. And that's all I'm going for. If you don't know, you don't know. When did you first walk in the house? The actual house?
I don't recall. It may have been that next morning.
Is that when you found the shirt?
No, I found the shirt on Saturday or Sunday. I can't. I don't recall exactly
Don't recall?
the day. No.
Okay.
It was. We were closing down the what we call closing down the search warrant. We were getting ready to release the house.
Okay. All right. So I'll come back to you. You didn't find the shirt that day, so I'm going to come back to the shirt. I've actually got the shirt pulled. I'm going to have that ready for the jury to see, and the shoes. But was that the first time you went in the house?
Was that the first
Like
time?
Saturday, Sunday?
No, that would not have been the first time. No.
Would it have been Friday, or did you go into the house at all on Thursday?
I believe it would have been Friday.
Okay. So after all these interviews with Melody, it's after that that you went into the house for the first time.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, because all your interviews with Melody Farris were completed by lunch on Friday, right?
Yes.
That would be the 6th.
Correct.
Friday the 6th. We're done. There's never another interview. That's it.
Right.
Okay. All right. So going back to the crime scene itself. When did you begin to actually learn what they were finding on the crime scene or not finding?
Throughout the case, you could hear the interviews that we played.
Sound like you're getting phone calls and texts.
Phone calls, text messages. Hey, step out. Stuff like that.
I mean, that's kind of annoying, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You're over here trying to do your job, and you're trying to interview a witness, and somebody's constantly distracting you.
Yes.
And it seemed like it was different people.
At times.
All right. What are you supposed to do in that situation, Hayes?
What am I supposed to do?
Right. What do you do when you're getting all this conflicting information? How do you parse through that?
Deal with it as it comes the best I can. You heard my phone going off in the interview at times. I'd ignore stuff, and then the phone would keep ringing, and I'd step out and answer. And some of it was, hey, what is she saying? Is there anything else we need? Asking for information from me based off of what I'm doing. Other was passing information along to me.
Okay. And that was information about what? What was the primary bit of information that was being passed along to you while you were interviewing Melody Farris?
Which time?
The first time.
The first interview?
The first interview.
I don't recall being interrupted too many times the first interview. We were on scene. We had just initially gotten there. I think most of the text messages, I say at the end of the interview, my sergeant's asking me to come down there. It's likely crime scene was getting there.
Which sergeant was that?
It would have been Sergeant Hands. He was
Okay.
my sergeant at the
Okay.
time. Yeah. I forgot where I was. He likely, I said in my interview, there goes crime scene truck. They just arrived, stuff like that. So,
By the way, where did that crime scene, did it just drive back there all the way down?
its initial response, I don't recall. At some point, it was back down in the backyard, I'd say halfway between the back of the house and the burn pile. So their equipment was close.
Did it drive kind of through the grass there? Back on you guys are sitting, and let me pull this up instead of us sitting here and talking about where you may have been. Were y'all sitting on this porch?
The bottom patio on the concrete?
So below that?
Below that porch,
Okay.
yes. Outside of, I believe it was Gary's office door.
So down here?
Correct.
Okay. See if I can find a better photo of that. Behind these trees is where you guys would have sat?
Yes, near the back.
Right there.
There you go. Yep.
Were you in the swing or was Melody?
Melody was in swing.
All right. So did the crime scene truck drive down through the grass right here?
No.
Where did it drive?
It went down the driveway. When you hear me in my interview say, there's a crime scene truck.
Okay.
I heard something coming, turned around and looked. It was coming down the driveway. I believe it may have made a wrong turn and went up towards the
Chicken
barn.
coops?
No,
Oh.
like towards the barn and people were kind of waving it to come back to the house. But after it got in the driveway, I don't know because I continued to interview Melody.
Okay. Did you ever see it drive down to the burn pile itself?
I did not
Okay.
see it drop down there. No,
Did you ever go back down to the burn pile after your interview with Melody?
I did.
Right. What was going on down there?
Crime scene was there. Phone calls were being made because again, it's an expansive scene. I think our crime scene unit looked at it and realized, well, we've never handled anything like this either. We need to get an expert or someone that knows more of what they're doing on the phone.
Do you know if Shaw was already on the scene at that point?
I don't recall if he came with a crime scene truck or drove separate. I don't. A lot of people showed up during my interview with Melody. When I compare from when I was told to go interview her, interviewed her for a little over an hour, and then came back, there was a lot more people on scene.
Okay. But Shaw, do you know that he was on scene yet by that point?
I don't recall exactly when here. I believe he was. He was one of the first responding crime scene supervisor, so he'd be out there to size it up.
So that's kind of leading into my next question. So
Okay.
he gets assigned to be crime scene supervisor, and you are detective, right?
Correct.
So how much were you two communicating?
Throughout the night, periodically.
Okay. Can you remember and explain that to the jury?
And again, I was fortunate enough to get to hear him testify, and I know what he did. His knowledge was around the burn pile. So he was the crime scene unit supervisor on a regular day. He's a sergeant, so everything kind of went through him. But on this day, he was over the burn pile area. So any information he would have relayed to me would have came from that burn pile area. How he assigned his unit, his people to different areas of the house, or who was supervising them, or who was in charge of what, I can't answer that.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Did you ever, that afternoon, walk over to the barn?
On the afternoon of the
5th.
5th.
Thursday the 5th.
I don't recall if it was on the 5th. I know I walked over there, and it was daytime. It was hot.
The first day you guys arrived.
Right.
You don't remember if you walked over there or not?
I don't.
Okay. So the sum total of what you did on the scene on the 5th was talk to Melody. Did you talk to anybody else that you can remember?
Yes.
Who?
Amanda Farris.
Talk about that interview, if you don't mind.
It was short. I spoke with her, started asking her questions. I didn't know she'd already been interviewed by somebody else, so it was very short.
Okay. What have you ever gathered or learned from Amanda? I mean, that's one of the 4 Farris children, correct?
Correct.
All right. And she's not testified at this time, correct?
Correct.
All right. So what have you learned from Amanda? She
Um,
was
no.
on scene, right?
She was on scene. I didn't learn much because I spoke with her briefly. She basically said I was here to pick up my fiance's daughter, Cameron, which is Chad Bruce's daughter. And when she got there, she learned her dad was missing. They started looking for him, found what they found in the burn pile, and she basically made the comment, I already told, I think the sergeant hands this, and I said, I didn't know you'd already been interviewed. She was upset. I wasn't going to make her go back through, what she saw right then. So I ended the interview and moved on, and I never spoke to her again.
I've been meaning to ask you this, because we have sat here and listened to these recordings forever, and that was before body cams really came into which did detectives use body cams even now?
Yes.
Y'all put body cams on to interview people.
It depends. So some people do. I believe what the policy states, if you're going to a pre-planned, like if you're going to go serve a search warrant, detectives are supposed to wear them.
Sure.
But natural deaths, things like that, you can record however you want.
Okay. But to interview folks, you typically wouldn't want to put a camera on and just have it right in their face, right?
It would depend.
Because in the interview room back at the sheriff's office, the cameras aren't out in the open; they're kind of concealed, right?
That's correct.
All right. So tell me how you put would you just walk up and have it already on and in your pocket, or how would you do that?
I typically carried a portfolio type thing. I would open that so I could write and hold it in my hand under it. Sometimes I'd lay it on the pad. You know, it just depend on the circumstance. Sometimes I'd put it on the table. It just depends on the situation.
Would your interviewee typically see the recorder or not?
Not always. It would depend.
Okay. So in this case, with Melody, for example, do you remember what you did with the recorder?
I don't recall. I believe in the first interview with her on the back patio, I probably kept it in my pad folio. Or
In the phone?
Yeah, it was on me. I wasn't necessarily setting it on the table so she could see it.
Right. And that's common practice, right?
Yes.
And the reason the jury's like, why are you asking this again, John Luke? I don't know that most people are aware that detectives don't get their recorder out and sit it on the table.
Correct.
Typically, you keep it in your pocket.
Some people will. I don't like mine in my pocket because if it moves around on the mic, you know, like when I wrote this one, it'll bust your eardrums if you got headphones on listening to your recording later. So, and sometimes it muffles the sound. So I typically never put mine in my pocket. It would be in my hand, under the pad folio, something like that.
But concealed.
Yes.
That's part of the practice.
Yes.
Right. And that's not against the rules.
Correct.
It's kind of highly encouraged, correct?
Correct.
Right. And did you record your interview with Amanda?
I believe I did, yes.
All right. Did you ever gather from Amanda or anybody else on the scene that she was bringing up the thing Scott was saying about a missing gun? Do you remember that at all?
I don't recall.
Okay. Did you ever get a chance to take a break during this first 12 hours from 1 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning? Did you ever stop?
Not really. I think they brought us pizza to the scene to eat, and just between interviews and you know, watching the crime scene do what they were doing, you know, trying to drink water, but never like go home and sleep for 3 hours break. Now.
Did you actually take any breaks at all in the first 24 hours? Any sleep?
Yeah. After I interviewed Miss Farris the second time, I interviewed Scott Farris after her. I believe I went home for a few hours, but I was back early the next morning to interview Miss Farris again.
Okay. Did you, so it's safe to say that you spent the vast majority of the first 24 hours just interviewing witnesses?
Correct.
When did you get your first actual report from either Shaw or Thrasher or Stewart about what was being found on the crime scene?
At some point, Kuykendall told me. Obviously, you know, I learned about the bullet that he had found in the basement, and I don't recall exactly. It wasn't long after he found it, you know, because of course that was a pretty big piece of evidence. I believe after I interviewed Melody on Saturday, the last time I interviewed, well, it's been a long time ago, on Friday.
The 6th.
The 6th,
Right.
Yes, which was my last interview with her that morning. Things started calming down a little bit, and I was able to spend some more time at the scene, finally getting to walk around and see what they were seeing.
But what I'm asking is, did Shaw sit down with you and give you a report of what they were doing?
When you say report, you like hand me a piece of paper or
No,
just
it doesn't have to be
verbal?
a piece of paper. He call you up. Hey, this is what's going on over here. This is what we found. This is what Thrasher found. This is what Stewart found. Did that ever happen?
That happened. I don't think it was on Friday. When I say we were doing the walk around through the scene to release it, that was actually with Shaw and Ballard, Lieutenant Ballard.
So that was probably Saturday.
Yes.
Okay. After you interviewed basically all the witnesses in the case.
Correct.
Don't you think it would have been helpful to you have had to have them been able to get you some of this information sooner than Saturday when y'all are kind of closing the scene down?
Sure, hindsight's always 20/20. I mean,
Well,
I'd like to know everything as soon as it happened, but it just didn't work out that way.
But you would have liked it to
Sure.
have happened. That would have been helpful for you to ask questions, right?
Absolutely. It would have been helpful if I could have cloned myself 10 times over and, you know, everything was feeding one brain.
Okay. Why was Kuykendall back at the house This is what I keep getting confused with, because you and him are tasked with this, and you heard him. He uses the word task a lot. I wasn't tasked to do this. I was tasked to do that, and I've still been trying to figure out who was tasking who here. So, why was your partner, essentially your detective partner, going and guarding physical evidence and then going in the house and doing crime scene investigation work and not out interviewing witnesses? But you were staying on task, doing your job, interviewing witnesses, but he's over here doing all kinds of stuff.
I don't know.
I mean, did that not frustrate you a little bit?
I didn't know what was happening at the time.
Okay.
I was in my interviews.
Okay. So tell me, going into the interview, the second interview with Melody at the station,
Okay.
the fire station, I believe, or community center.
Yeah, it's the precinct, the sheriff's office precinct, fire station, and community center.
It's everything, all in one.
Yes.
In Freeholm.
Correct.
Okay. So you're out there preparing that. You explained to the jury the area you did the interviews and all these things. But what was your plan going into the interview with Melody?
To get the truth.
What was your vision of the case? You've been on the case for 10 hours at that point. What was your thoughts?
At the time, everybody's pointing fingers at everybody, you know. So I was going in knowing now that Gary had been shot, that we found the bullet. At this time, I didn't know about the bullet in the basement, but I knew that Gary had been shot, so that changed the outlook of the investigation. You know, I'd already spoken with Melody once. Wanted to see what else she knew now that I could present her this new information.
Okay. What is your tactic? What would you say your tactics are generally for an interview or an interrogation?
My tactics?
Yeah.
It depends. I like to go in and try to read the people that I'm talking to. I feel like I can read people pretty well. Sometimes people need to be talked to a little more aggressively than others. Sometimes a simple conversation can accomplish the goal. So I'm pretty fluid in that.
Okay. So you seem to be, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but typically yours is a more conversational style. Correct?
Correct.
And I mean, you know, we've all sat here and listened to so many hours of your interviews. You don't seem to be very confrontational, correct?
At this time, no.
Okay. Never really in any of these interviews you seem to be the one that was like, Pope was brought in up in Tennessee to be confrontational, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And then in this one, as much as I guess he can be because he's always apologizing, Kuykendall was the confrontational one.
Yeah, I'd listen to the interview. I'd agree with that.
Okay. So was that predetermined or just something that happened?
No. With which one?
Not with Pope. I think y'all determined in advance he was going to be the bad cop.
With Kuykendall?
With Kuykendall.
It wasn't predetermined. You know, that interview happened pretty quickly after the bullet in the rib bone was found, and he and I had done so many interviews together in the past because most of our criminal investigations career we've worked together in some form or fashion, you know, and we read each other pretty good. I know when to shut up when he's talking. He knows when I butt in to listen and things like that.
Well, it sounded like he did a lot of talking in that interview.
He always does.
Okay. Maybe sometimes when he's under cross-examination.
He's probably going to be mad when he goes back and watches this.
But I want to get to something. So, you know, you guys already knew essentially about her having a relationship with Rusty Barton. When did you find out about it?
Yep. Family members, I don't recall. I mean, obviously, I think Scott had mentioned it, the name Rusty Barton. Then we found, eventually had found that credit card.
Which Kuykendall found, I believe.
I don't recall who.
Okay. All right, so you had heard it from family members already. You knew that Scott had said there's a missing gun and there's a Rusty Barton, right?
And the Ted Wiley, yes.
And Ted Wiley, you already knew about Ted Wiley, a guy from 10 years ago.
Right.
Right, but, you know, she's not over here, and the district attorney's office kind of questioned about things that she didn't bring up and things like that. You know, you've been doing this for a long time, Hayes. People don't typically bring up extramarital relationships in interviews right away, right?
Oh, they typically don't offer the information, no.
They don't.
Right.
So that's not unusual, right?
I'd agree with that.
Okay. So going into, it's safe to say, did you know about any extramarital relationships going into the first interview sitting on the porch?
I don't believe I did at that time.
Okay. But you did already know about the gun
I'd heard mention of it.
going into that interview
Correct.
within the first 30 minutes of you being on a crime scene.
Correct.
Okay. But you didn't know about the affair.
I don't believe I did.
All right. But you knew about the affair by the time we get to the station that night.
Yes.
Did you know anything more, like any details about the affair? Can you remember?
I believe the statement was that she would disappear up to Tennessee, and you know the people that Miss Barton that she was going up there to visit and take care of, and
Martha Jane.
Martha Jane.
All right.
Martha
So
Jane.
you already knew about Martha Jane.
Yes.
So it's safe. I mean, we've all been together now, and I keep saying that, but it's unique for me to cross-examine somebody who has sat here and had 2.5 weeks to study for the exam.
Yes.
But it's safe to say that you knew all the cast and characters that this jury knows about right now within about the first 6 hours of you being on scene.
Most of them, yes. I'd say that's fair.
The primary
yeah.
people on that picture board that the district attorney's office printed out, and you knew about it.
Yes.
Even some of them you'd say you knew about within 2 hours, the vast majority of them.
Yes.
Okay. How do you think that framed the way you thought for the rest of this case?
Knowing how many people were involved or that names were brought up?
Kind of generally what you already knew. You knew that there was a spouse and she was having an affair, and you have a son that says a gun is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that has been the general theme of y'all's case since within the first hour of arriving on scene?
We were told that pretty early arriving on scene, and as we continued to investigate it, the evidence continued to point that way.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the scene, because I want to kind of get to this point. You know, you go back to the scene after her interviews, and Hegwood, you collected some evidence, did you not? Church. How do I get into this? Do I need gloves?
And there's some gloves.
I have some.
Case has gloves in there.
There's gloves in this.
You probably need some gloves too. We'll get some together. I'll give you the shoes back. So where were you back when you went back to the house? Where were you in the house when you found this shirt?
The shirt, the master bedroom closet.
Okay. And doing a terrible job. Johnny Cochran would be upset with me putting on these gloves. All right, I got it. I'm going to do this with one glove. And Hegwood, I'm good to pull this out?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay. May I approach, Your Honor? Okay. If you could hold that up. Open. You could open it. We've seen pictures, but sometimes I think we should look at the real things. Is that the shirt that you found? I mean, it's okay if you don't remember, but
Yes.
all right. Tell me what drew your attention to this shirt.
At the time, it was a little darker back then. I think in the packaging, some of the soot has been wiped away, but there was what appeared to be.
You think that was soot?
Mhm.
That's what you said.
That's what it looked like to me.
Okay. And was it in a? All right. There's all kinds of circles drawn on this.
Yeah, there is now.
What is this stuff? Did you notice any of this?
When I pulled it out and handed it off, we all started looking at it. And, I had 2 crime scene detectives there with me.
Do you remember which ones?
It was Shaw, I know, was with me because we were doing the walk through the house. And Ballard was on scene because he was called over as well. That big cutting, we started seeing stains that looked like they were possibly blood.
Right. Now I got to ask you this: Did you say to Your Honor? Could you turn on the overhead, please? Yes, I'll do. I will do whatever you guys think I should do. Alright. So this is the spot you're talking about right here.
Correct.
All right. Which could be any number of things. Yes?
I agree.
Dirt, you name it.
Could be.
Did you ever look over at Shaw and say, "Hey, Shaw, can we do a test to see if this is soot?"
No.
All right. Did Shaw look over at you and say, "We got a really good soot test. I can check for that."
No.
Well, then how? You don't really know what this is supposed to be, right?
Well, not scientifically, I can know. My guesstimate is from looking at it.
It's just a guesstimate from looking at it, but it
Sure.
could be any number of things, right?
I agree with that.
All right. And then the blood, we got cuttings and all this stuff. We got cutting of blood up here. This is the hole that was cut out. That was where the blood was found.
Yes.
And you were made aware at least later that was just Melody's blood, right? You knew that.
Yes.
Okay. You know that now.
I do now.
Okay. Did you ever ask anybody on scene what she was wearing and when she was wearing this shirt?
No.
Okay. The shoes. Where did they go? Is there another pair of shoes?
There's 2 pairs.
I need both. I'm sorry, Wood. I apologize. All right, these shoes right here. Did you find these? I think you found all the shoes, right?
I did.
All right. So, what did you notice about these shoes?
When I looked at the bottom of them, you could see what appeared to be a blood stain on the bottom.
All right. But they hadn't. There was 2 pairs of shoes, both roughly looking like Nikes.
Correct.
What's that?
Small table in the back.
The little foldable one?
You put this stuff on?
Yeah. Bring in the, let's
Yeah, let's get
let's take a second.
we, Thanks, Judge. You know what, Hayes? This is why I'm not in charge of crime scene intake.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Judge makes another quick decision and doesn't have his card and can't get back in this.
Okay, you can have a seat. All right, so this is the one. Did you find these first?
I don't recall which ones I found first.
But these were not wet.
Correct. This pair was not wet.
Okay. But did you find them in the closet or in the mud room?
They're in the closet.
All right. And nothing, to your knowledge, has been cut from these shoes, right?
Correct.
So this, I believe, is what you guys continue to be blood. And we know it's been 6 years since this, but this was the blood spot right up here?
Yes, the dark spot under the red, under your thumb, yeah.
Right here.
Yes.
Was there any other blood that you knew of on these shoes?
Not that I knew of that I could see.
Okay. There's some markings up here. I just didn't know if you made those markings or you had any clue what that...
I did not make those markings.
All right. And you knew these were ultimately tested, right?
Yes,
And none of these involved Gary's blood. This is Melody's blood.
that's correct.
All right. So what did you... I mean, you were the detective. What did you think was the cause of this blood on her shoes?
I didn't know. I know, when we spoke with her, she had broken some plates around this time frame, and, you can hear in one of the interviews, she pricked her finger, and she's working out on the farm. I don't know.
Did you ever go through any of the phone dumps in this case? They've been admitted through you, so did you go through them?
Some of them, yes.
Did you ever see the picture of Melody's bleeding finger?
I did eventually, yes. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so would you think that would be maybe when she got the blood on the shoes?
Could have.
But you don't know?
I don't know.
Right. But it was her blood?
Yes.
Right. All right, now I'm going to approach with these shoes. So where did you find these?
They were all in the closet. I believe there's been photographs shown of them. She had like cubby. I don't know. That's the best way I can describe it. Like cubby holes from elementary school with shoes in them. And I just started grabbing stuff.
But you testified earlier that you felt these shoes. Now, I think I heard you say you had gloves on.
Yes.
Just like we do now. Mm-hmm. So, how could you tell they were wet?
They were cold.
Okay.
Colder than the other pair.
But did you see any water beating off, or did you squeeze it and have any water drops come out?
No.
And these shoes, were they tested? Do you know?
I don't know. I believe a spot, Sergeant Shaw on the scene had swabbed a spot on one of them and did the presumptive test, and it was negative.
Negative for blood. No, there was nothing on these shoes.
Correct.
Okay. So at this time, Your Honor, I would like to admit Defense Hayes Exhibits 1, which is the shirt, 2, which is the shoes with the blood, and 3, which is the just plain shoes.
Any objections? All right, they're admitted.
And you know, this is a logical kind of stopping point for me.
If we can go for another 30 minutes
Okay.
or so, let's do it.
Okay.
But yeah, I knew there'd be no way you'd be done.
I'm just trying to find transition points. Okay. I think we can take the gloves off. I want to go now and talk about the begin. There's like you said, you testified earlier, and I think that was one of the most informative pieces of information about being a detective. You don't get to do any of the fun stuff, and you spend all this time typing up search warrants and keeping this case forever. That's what a detective is. It's not fun like being on TV, right?
It's any type of law enforcement. It's 90% paperwork and 10% fun, if that.
Okay. So let's start into that. So you have now interviewed a vast number of people. You have interviewed Melody. So let's go to, I think the interview started about 9 o'clock. You testified earlier too on the 6th with Melody. That's the last interview.
Correct.
Went on for 3 or 4 hours. What'd you do after that? After this long interview with Melody?
You're talking about specifically on Friday?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
They were still searching. I'd gone to the scene at some point. They were still out there searching. Probably gone home and got some more rest as well.
Okay, so you went home and got a little rest. When did you guys, I don't know if this was the point you started tasking Well, where was Kuykendall getting his tasks from that he testified to?
I don't know.
Not from you.
Some of them may have been from me, but mostly, yeah, someone else in the early stages, the first couple of days.
Okay. So how did you guys break up responsibilities from this point forward? As far as, because it looked like Kuykendall kind of went off and maybe started checking alibis. Would you say that's right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. How did you guys decide that?
You know, again, supervisors were directing people what to do because I wasn't there the entire time. So sometimes we made decisions and checked things on our own based off of the interviews that we had done, followed up on our own information that we'd obtained.
So you would report to Hans,
Yes.
who was here just the other day. We saw him. You would report to Hans. Who would he report to?
The next person above him would be Lieutenant Clark. Whether he was following the chain of command or not, I don't know.
You don't know. So Hans and Clark would be giving out responsibilities
Correct.
simultaneously.
Sometimes.
So who was you were talking to Hans?
Mm-hmm.
Who was Kuykendall talking to?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. So where did the idea come from to separate and go to Tennessee versus go check out alibis? Because you went to Tennessee next, right?
No, I think I didn't go to Tennessee until Tuesday.
You went on the 10th, I believe.
Of the next week, yeah, on the 10th. That Monday, I called, started checking alibis. I called Ted and Philip, checking on Scott's alibi.
Okay. Why did you not take Kuykendall with you to Tennessee?
At some point in the early stages of this, Kuykendall started working another homicide investigation that had come in. So Kuykendall at some point became not available to me. I don't recall if that was this instance or not, but in the early stages of it, because I remember Kuykendall wasn't very happy that he had to go do something else. He wanted to stay on this case with me. Pope was available. I know Pope. I know his style. I know he's good at what he does. I think I asked him if he wanted to ride up with me because when I was told I was going, and when the decision made I was going, you know, they're like, pick somebody, make the arrangements, get up there.
So Pope was your pick, and
Yes.
that's why he went with you.
Yes.
Y'all make that decision on Monday the 9th?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you know when that other case was that started to take Kuykendall's attention?
I don't remember exactly. I just remember it's in the early stages of this.
All right. So you've sat here, again, very unique. You've sat here and you've watched this day after day after day after day after day. And you're the lead. You're the guy that's had to come in here and answer to all this. But at what point do you think that it would have been appropriate to do the next level of checking, i.e., looking into Chris's alibis? More than just talking to Jenna, which, did you ever listen to that phone call, by the way?
Which phone call?
The phone call that Kuykendall had with Jenna.
At some point, not in the early stages of this.
Did that not come off as weird to you?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no.
Okay. Well, so why yes and why no?
I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about the way it ended abruptly. Not everybody likes to talk to the police. Some people are busy. They got things to do.
Okay.
Some people are told by other people not to talk to the police. So, you know, just...
Okay. But what was weird about it? Her cutting off the interview? All right. You got to answer.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
But also that somewhere in there, and you've heard this now too, and I don't know if you were aware of this at the time or if Kuykendall reported it back, that Chris slept alone that night.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You knew that. When did you know that?
I don't
That's
recall.
what I'm trying to get at.
I don't recall exactly when I found that out.
All right. So Kuykendall didn't call you, and then you didn't then say, okay, I think it would be appropriate now for you to get a phone dump on Chris so we know where he was at. Did he ever even call you and tell you this stuff?
We spoke daily. I don't recall the content of the conversations.
Okay. And did you guys ever do any kind of geofence to track where Chris was?
The only geofence we did was of the property.
Oh, just of the property.
Yeah, Priscilla.
But not of Chris's phone specifically.
We did the cell phone records. I know we did some cell tower dumps. I'm not going to explain those and how they work.
But you didn't-
of the property.
None of that. You don't know how any of that turned out.
I know we used it to verify some of Chris's statements, and nothing showed that he came back to the property when he said he was away from there.
So far as you know.
Correct.
Okay. But you didn't have anything to do with that part.
That data was, those search warrants were being written by someone else. When the data would come in, that data would be forwarded to the intelligence unit. They would process the data or do whatever, and then, give us information back. Eventually.
But again, you heard what your partner was doing, that there was a Pokey City or Poke Bowl or whatever the name of the restaurant was near where he lived, and Kuykendall didn't go down there and even interview anybody. Do you think that was a good decision?
I don't know what was going through his head at the time, or whoever made the decision not to do that.
Okay. And did you think it was strange that nobody saw Chris from the time that he went to bed to the time that it was about 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning out at the Peachtree Road Race? That's a huge amount of time. Wouldn't you agree?
I wouldn't say it's a long amount of time, or an unusual amount of time. I don't know when everyone else woke up or...
But it's the night that you guys are contending that Gary Farris was murdered.
Okay.
The night of the 3rd into the 4th. I still think they have the Peachtree Road Race on the 4th of July. Mm-hmm. I've never made it to the end of the race, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But that was when. That's when you guys are contending, I believe, that this murder happened. Is that right?
Correct.
And Chris Farris was at the property that day.
Correct.
And he was the last adult other than her to see his father alive.
Correct.
And you just took him at his word on that?
No.
And Jenna says, well, I know he didn't leave, but she was asleep. And she didn't know he'd left and went out to the race. Right?
That's right. I remember hearing that.
Okay. So you're hearing all these things. And, hey, you're up in Tennessee and you're doing everything you can to get information. But your partner that you've left back down here, it just looks to me, and I'm the defense attorney and I've got you guys on cross-examination, it looks like you guys began to totally shift and laser focus and just rush through these other things. But you were focusing in on Melody by that point and just trying to quickly check these boxes, and we're not going to move any further down this road. Would you say that's right?
I wouldn't say we're just trying to check boxes. I'd say that we were following the evidence.
Right. But you didn't close the boxes is what I'm saying. That's where I'm at. You've got a wide open... You thought you had an alibi. There is no alibi for the hours of bedtime, which we don't really know when that was, for Chris, and when his wife and Addison went out and saw him at the race. There's like 11 or 12 hours right there that you guys have got nothing on.
Phone records. We have his phone records.
You've not brought in these phone records. Any of this, you're just saying that. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Judge, is there a question? That was a little argumentative.
It was a little argumentative. Okay. All right. So when did Kuykendall actually leave the case? Do you know?
I don't recall.
So at that point, who was your partner? Who was helping you?
I had the ability, if I needed help, to ask, to direct it. We went over the rank structure. I was a detective at the time, so I was technically a corporal rank, which outranks a deputy. We had a little bit of authority to, direct people to do things. Even as a lead detective, if you're an investigator deputy rank, they afford you a little bit of, this is more important, I need this. So if I needed someone to do something, I could ask.
Let me ask you this. I'm getting close to being finished with Kuykendall because he was no longer involved in the case. But what did you do when you found out about Joanne Ward? Did he tell you about that?
I don't recall.
You don't recall?
No.
That Gary was having his own extramarital relationships? When you were finding this information out, what were you thinking?
It didn't seem important to me at the time that Gary had affairs many, many years ago. At the time, it didn't seem like it would help me solve how he got shot.
Did you ever see any of the emails between Joanne Ward and Gary Farris, which were within the week, right there, all the way to the time of his death? So that wasn't years ago. You can see that Gary was at least attempting to have a relationship with another woman.
Did I ever see those?
Yes. Did you see that? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So Kuykendall, I don't think he necessarily got those, but he asked these questions. You just don't remember if he told you about that, do you?
Correct.
Okay. And Angela Phillips, when did you learn about her statements?
Her initial statements or
Both.
the follow-up?
Right.
I interviewed her when she called back the second time I wanted to. I can find the date in my report. I don't recall the date.
But it was later and it was you, right?
Yes.
And you're the one she disclosed this full relationship to, all the way
Yes.
back in the 90s. That
Yes.
she alleges that she can't remember if she had sex with him or not.
That's correct.
All right. So by that point in the interview, or in this investigation, you had essentially taken over all interviews because Kuykendall was not in the case anymore.
To a point, except for, when Sergeant Pope was helping or anyone else.
But you would agree with me that this case is probably the most complex murder case in the history of Cherokee County at this point.
During my career, since, from, we'll say 2009 when I went to Uniform Patrol until this point, yes, it's the only one I know of.
Okay. And it appears that by mid-July, and tell me if I'm wrong, that by mid-July of 2018, that you have basically been left holding the bag by yourself.
I wouldn't say that's true. People were still authoring search warrants. They were getting sent off. Things were happening in the background. As technology evolved and, we switched from old-fashioned police work to now we got all this technology and stuff. There's a lot of people involved in intelligence. You heard Bot Zone come, Kevin at the time, processing, trying to extract information, and that took some time.
But they can only do that off of the information that you gather, right?
Yes.
And so, again, for the year, if I had to say from July the 15th of 2018 to July of 2019, which is right about the time that you issued the warrant, which you're the one who signed the affidavit for the arrest warrant, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So in all that time, though, you were the guy. You didn't have a partner on the case, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Well, let me ask that question better. You didn't have a partner, correct?
Correct.
All right. Okay. So that was a lot for you to undertake on your own.
Again, if I needed help, I asked for it. There were still multiple people in the background working on the investigation.
Tell me about, as we began to transition into the interviews that you had with Chris and Scott. What led to that? For you to sit down and have an interview with both of them at the same time?
We heard it said, I think it was in the interviews, at one point the entire family stopped talking to us. After several weeks, Chris and Scott decided that wasn't what they wanted to do, so they reached out to us, and I set up a time for them to come in.
Okay. And tell me about that interview.
It was basically just them reestablishing contact. They wanted to come in and see if they could gain any information from, where we were in the investigation. They decided that they weren't going to follow the orders, the request, I should say, of the attorney and the rest of the family, that they wanted to stay in touch with us and help any way they could.
So, and that, you used the right word, Detective, that they did say they wanted to gain information from you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you not find that to be a little bit suspicious?
No.
Okay. But in cases when, would you have considered them suspects at that time?
At that time?
Yes.
When this thing first started, the whole world was a suspect, and then, as Mr. Fogus put it, we started shrinking the world down. So I don't recall at this time if I would have considered them suspects.
Okay.
I don't recall at which points I considered them suspects and ruled them out and ruled them back in, or
Right,
or any of
because
that.
you later ruled one of them back in, correct?
I wouldn't say that's correct.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that, but let's go back to the center. They were asking you for information about the case, yes?
They're asking if I could provide any, yes.
And you did, yes?
I don't recall. It's likely. Would have
What-
given them an update.
Well, let's do this, because I don't want to sit here and start replaying interviews for you. What do you remember right now about that interview with Chris and Scott, other than they were asking you information about the case? Did you gather anything from them?
I don't recall.
Do you recall anything about that interview?
Other than what I've already stated, not the specifics now.
Okay, all right. But do you think it's bad practice to take two witnesses and put them in the room at the same time so they can hear each other talk? Are you guys not trained to not do that kind of thing?
I mean, not specifically. We sometimes we use it as a tactic to put them together and see what they'll say together, and then separate them and talk to them again later and see what they say separate. And
Okay. So, at that point, you say that Chris and Scott were not suspects in your mind, and that would have been by late July. I believe it was around the 24th, somewhere in there. You interviewed them. You'd already determined they're not suspects.
like I said, I don't recall labeling them a suspect or not. I don't.
Do you ever remember in your mind? But you've used the word "shrink the world down."
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know when you shrank the world down. When did you do that?
Pretty early in the investigation.
How early?
Within the first couple of weeks.
Okay, so I'm out here now talking a couple of weeks out. So somewhere in there, would you said the first day? Or
Would
after?
it have begun shrinking the first day? Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about shrinking it down to Melody. It was after that second interview, wasn't it? You completely shrunk it down.
It was. I mean, she was the only one that we had provable lies. Early on in the investigation, she was being deceptive. And
So let's talk about that.
okay.
So when you have a witness that you believe to be deceptive, which people do that in cases, right?
Do people do that?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So we've got her lying about an affair, which you charged her with that. Or
Yes.
she admitted to the affair.
Eventually.
Essentially within the same conversation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But you still charged her with it.
Correct.
Okay. So you did that, and so because of that, that's her being deceptive in your mind, right? About an affair.
Yes.
Okay. You would agree with me that an affair is completely proving an affair is not proving a murder.
Correct.
Okay. Can we end there, Judge?
Although I'm concerned about giving you the overnight to recharge, but I don't know that it would make any difference. All right. With that, we'll break for the evening, start back at 9 in the morning.